Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton. I am intentionally encouraged when I see people doing business the right way. And for the last 15 years, Damon Burton and his team at SEO National have done just that. Now you might say, Brian, what can they do for me in my business? I'm going to tell you what they can do for you. They can help you understand search engine optimization. There are a lot of players out there in the marketplace, but you want a team of people that are going to be dedicated to working with you and helping you to understand search engine optimization and how you can show up higher on search engines so that you can bring more revenue into your business. Damon and his team are full of integrity, honesty, decency, and trust. And if that's important to you and that encourages you, I would encourage you to give them a call today at 855-736-6285 or go to SEOnational.com and get a free quote and tell them you heard about it on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Get ready for a dynamite conversation coming up right now on the Intentional Encourager podcast. And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us again today. Another rock star on the Intentional Encourager podcast. I am so blown away, and I'm blown away when I have people that say, you need to have this person on there. And I'm like, they've been on my list forever. And this is no exception. She is a keynote speaker that sings. I'm interested in finding out about that. She turns burned out, checked out employees into energized, motivated, and connected teams. And she does a ton. She talks about motivation, resilience, mental health, unmuting yourself. You can find her on LinkedIn at Rachel Druckenmiller, Druckenmiller. But you can find her right here, right now on the Intentional Encourage podcast. Rachel Druckenmiller. Good morning, Rachel. How are you?
I'm doing well. I love the focus on the last name. Usually people are like, how do I do that? But you nailed it.
Well, listen, 7 years as a high school public address announcer. My son's sophomore year of high school, well, his freshman year of high school, they had a young man that came into their school. His name was Marek Ivanovich. He was from Poland. Didn't look like what it sounded. And so I had to get really good in 2 years at pronouncing last names like Suhanov, a young man he went to school with from Russia. So Druckenmiller's a piece of cake. Besides, there used to be an NFL quarterback named Jim Druckenmiller. So I remember, I thought about that name and being a sports fan, but you know, yeah, who was it? Dale Carnegie said, the sweetest sound to a person's ears is the sound of their own name. So why, I needed to get that right, Rachel.
I appreciate that. It does, it does matter. I feel like I end up having a lot of grace because it's, but to your point, it's phonetic, you know what I mean? But in any case, I'm with you that to really acknowledge like a name is part of our identity and to really take the time to acknowledge that is important.
Well, and again, I love where we're starting this conversation because I feel like in our world today that people are searching for their identity. So let's just start there. That's I love how you so beautifully took us to the starting place here, is that identity matters to folks. And I want to get your perspective on this, because here's where I find myself as I approach 50. I am finding my identity is not as important to me as it used to be. I'm finding myself in that place of wanting to step back and be a mentor and a supporter and an encourager of people, because I've been a front man. You talking about singing. I started singing when I was 3 in church. My dad got me up when I was 3 in church. I'm finding myself, the older I get, I want to kind of step back and just mentor and encourage and help other people. Why do you feel like that identity has become so palpably important to so many people in today's world?
I mean, because I think a lot of people don't feel they have a clear sense of what theirs is. And, I think a lot of the times we find our identity through the groups that we associate ourselves with, or through the communities we associate ourselves with, or through the family that we come from, or through the work that we do. And I think in our society, there's been a diminishing of connection through community. And so if people don't have a sense of clear connection to a group of people, it's really hard to sort of you kind of miss the opportunity of letting those people reflect back what they see in you.
Yeah.
And I think that so much of our identity, I mean, we could talk for 10 hours about that topic.
Yeah.
It's something that all of us want to feel a sense of, because it gives us a sense of meaning, right? To be able to be clear about who we are and why we're here. I think a lot of people are searching and seeking. And I think for many people, their faith is something that is a strong connector to a sense of, or a strong root foundation in terms of identity. For other people, it's their job. For other people, it's my dad's an Ironman triathlete. He's 72 years old. He's doing his 7th race this summer. And a big part of his identity is connected to being a triathlete, So I think part of it comes from
mad props to your pops. That's really, let me add, so let's go there for just a second.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me jumping in there, I'm fascinated by that. What do you think gives, you work with teams, you work with people all the time. Mm-hmm. You study how teams work, you study how they're built, the cultures around them. And you've got someone in your own family at 72 years old that is still pushing himself and challenging himself and seemingly, and Rachel, forgive me for kind of assuming here, but he should be kicking back with his feet up and enjoying retirement, enjoying his grandkids, enjoying the things that most 70-somethings enjoy, and he's still challenging and pushing himself. What's the one thing that you've taken from your dad that has helped you be able to coach teams and people more effectively?
A sense of humility. My dad's really humble. He's really humble and he's really curious. And so I definitely, pride can be my vice, right? We talk about the different vices that we have. If I fall into an area of what my vice could be, pride can be it. But I've always been curious. I've always been a curious person who's observant, who asks questions, who wants to learn more, who wants to dig deeper, versus making assumptions about people. And I think curiosity is so essential and important if we want to connect with each other, if we want to be effective, because when we start making assumptions and ordering people around and thinking we know better, I mean, that's just a trap, and we're likely not, we're probably not gonna be very effective if we fall into that spot. So I feel like with my dad, this sense of curiosity and possibility. I mean, when I was growing up, he listened to Tony Robbins, CDs and watched Oprah and other things. He was always reading the newspaper, reading something. And so growing up in an environment that had both curiosity and possibility, I think is something that I bring into the work that I do with the teams and organizations I work with.
That's funny you mentioned that, because when we think of people like Tony Robbins and we think of people like Oprah, you talk about how your dad was influenced by those people, but yet when they burst onto the scene in the 80s, they weren't called influencers. They were motivational speakers. And if you're watching on YouTube, I put that in air quotes. We've really changed how people are termed and viewed, but the work is still the same. And I'm so fascinated by what you just said there, how your dad just kept taking in things that motivated him, and underneath that probably provided him a lot of encouragement to do some of the things that he wanted to do in his life. You're the perfect person to go here with. So I want to go here with you.
Sure.
Why are we missing? Because I feel like it's kind of a mission of mine. I believe every company should have a culture of encouragement within their company. Leaders should be encouraging their teams, and then teams, as they directly are directly involved with customer engagement, should be encouraging their customers. But it feels like we're doing everything but. Why do you feel like that it's a hard concept? And I ask you this because of the work you've done and what you just said about your dad. It was so powerful. Why do we continue to miss the encouragement component within the culture of teams?
I I mean, I think people are very focused on their own stuff and what they have to get done, and they're feeling overwhelmed and they're feeling exhausted and they're burned out and they're grieving from all the losses and change and uncertainty in the past 2 years. I mean, certainly these were issues prior to that, but I think especially just now, if we're talking about this at this point in time, this moment in time, that people are exhausted and they're feeling disconnected. And I think a lot of the times when people feel like their own, bucket is empty, that it's hard for them to pour into other people. And so I think a lot of the times organizations and their leaders, they just don't understand how truly important and essential it is to encourage people, and how one note or one email or one comment could be something that lifts somebody up from a place of being ready to leave an organization, or could lift somebody up who's feeling really depleted and defeated. That it really doesn't take much. And I have a story I can share with you that happened just yesterday about the power of, an encouraging...
Oh, please do. Yeah, please
Yeah.
Go right ahead. The floor is yours.
So as we were talking, right before the conversation, I've been having some dental issues and chipped a tooth and need a crown and switching a dentist. I just started seeing a year ago which wasn't happy there. And so I found a practice that a friend recommended to me.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton. Prices are going up by the day. We've got to find ways to increase our household revenue. Now, a couple ways you could do that is, one, you could go and ask your boss for a raise. But if that doesn't work, I've got another way for you. It's my friend Joe Hart's program called Products for Profit. Joe's been a guest here on the Intentional Encourager podcast and told his story about how learning retail arbitrage changed his life, and he's been helping thousands of people change theirs. Now, retail arbitrage is simply this. It's taking a product and buying it and then reselling it online for a higher price, and you keep the profits. And guess what? Amazon and Walmart use third-party resellers every day to fulfill their customer orders. I want you to go to productsforprofit.com or productsforprofit.card.co. Get connected to Joe's team. Tell them you heard about it on the Intentional Encourager podcast and start making money today with Products for Profit. And now let's get back to more great conversation on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
And she said, they're incredible. And I walked into the office, and first of all, it didn't really seem like a dental office. They had, those big signs, the step and repeat, where they had like their logo on the back, and you could take a picture in front of it. And then they had like quotes around the wall, and they had a phone charging station, and they had a raffle prize like sitting at the front desk that, hey, if you like us on Instagram and refer a friend, you can be put in for this raffle. And there was like just this bright pink kind of accent color everywhere. It was, there was like pop music playing. The second you walked in, it just felt like an uplifting experience. And most people don't like to go to the dentist.
Yeah,
right?
the vibe was there from the get-go, right?
Yeah, it was there from the get-go. And then they were very kind. There were three people working at the front desk. And when the person took me back, she paused. Instead of just, they'll take you back. They maybe make small talk. They leave you in the exam room. They don't say a whole lot to you, right? Mm-hmm. As she took me back, she stopped at the front desk and she was telling me, so, these are the folks that if you ever need help with such and such, like here that they can help you. And she was being very intentionally focusing on like elevating and bringing attention, really seeing the people that I think so often at a medical practice get overlooked. The front desk are like people where everyone else goes to complain. They don't get positive attention.
Yeah.
So like from the get-go, and then she took me through and walked me through the room where all the supplies were. And she said, each of our, everything that we use is individually packaged, for safety. And then she was taking me through what they call their treatment suites. They're not exam rooms, they're treatment suites. And they all have a different theme to them. So one theme was like nature. She said, we're going to take you back to our superhero treatment suite. So she took me back, and there's pictures of like Marvel characters, like paintings and stuff on the canvas prints on the wall. And there's a sign hanging in front of the room. And, they said, and here we have a welcome gift for you. And sitting on the chair is like this bag with, their logo on it and a hat and a hand sanitizer and, something else.
So they don't know you work with, forgive me for interrupting.
No.
I got to imagine, and I'm putting myself in that moment. I'm kind of walking down that hallway with you.
Yeah.
My prefrontal cortex would just be going off. because I mean, like you know, I've spent a lot of years working around customer engagement and things like that. You working with teams like you have, what are you thinking as you're walking down the hall? Is everything inside of you just going pinging like crazy?
I know. I'm like, I want to take my phone out and record this entire. Like that's what I wanted to do. Like,
no,
really,
but it's. I mean, it's amazing. I just. What was your reaction in the moment? I mean, I don't want to derail the story, but what are you thinking in this moment as you're walking down the hall? And from the minute you walk into this office, I mean, I can see it on your face.
Yeah.
You're blown away. Like, oh my gosh, where has this place been all my life?
Yeah. I just, speaking of the topic of this podcast, what comes to mind for me is just how intentional everything was. So intentional, and it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel staged. It felt genuine and authentic. And when they sat me down, she was talking to me and I was explaining that I had had some of these challenges. I felt like she was kind. The dental assistant hygienist was kind and was patient, and, went and got the doctor, and he came in and he was wearing like those small little hats that the doctors wear. I think his hat might've had superheroes on it. So like just this taking me back to my days of almost like loving my pediatric dentist that I had for so long. And he was patient. I never felt rushed. I sometimes can go into a lot of detail when I'm explaining things that have happened health-wise. And he was patient, and he listened, and he told me something that I didn't even know. So for anyone listening that has kiddos, or for anyone that's an adult that was on, so this is a side note, bonus content, I guess, that ever took lots of antibiotics as a child, that can cause discoloration and weakening in your teeth. And he pointed out something that no dentist in my entire life ever pointed out to me about that's where some of the issues are for me. And so anyway, they were so kind. And one of them, before I was leaving, I just commented on how everyone was so intentional and patient and kind. And she said, you found your dental home.
Wow.
And I felt that way. When I left, I posted on Instagram about it. And this is the power, right? Of, again, I see that as being an intentional encourager of these people who just took care of me, frankly.
Rachel, forgive me. You are just, this is just, you're lighting it up today in this conversation. And I can't help but let's dive deeper there.
Yeah.
That so totally correlates to the work that you do. Because people, to your point you made just a few minutes ago, people are feeling overwhelmed. They're feeling frustrated. They're feeling discouraged. We see it all the time. And I've especially been keen to it, and you see it in the corporate world as well, where now companies are intentionally recruiting from other companies, the talent pool. They're picking the best talent from other companies. And a lot of companies are on the defensive because they're losing great people. They're getting recruited. We see it in the service industry where you go to restaurants and half the dining room is full and there's still a wait there because the labor market is shrinking and things like that. And you go to a place that just totally just knocks everything out of the ballpark. And you talked about the intentionality. When you think about the work that you do, and forgive me for focusing on the work, I'm just fascinated how all this just comes together. Why is that a hard concept for some companies to get around, of just doing a few little things intentionally that will bring the retention factor up probably 10x if we were looking at it metrically?
Yeah.
Why do you think there's reticence on companies to just do these little intentional things to keep people engaged and focused and knock some of those feelings out of the water that you just mentioned?
Yeah. Well, because it takes work, and people want the path of least resistance. And if you have to consistently do something over time that requires intentionality and thoughtfulness, that takes a certain degree of energy, mental and emotional energy. And I think a lot of times organizations are looking for a quick fix. They're looking for what's one big thing I can do. They're looking for some grand gesture, and it's never the grand gesture. It's always the consistent little things that we do. I mean, none of any one of those things that they did, that the story I just shared, was earth shattering. Aside from the fact that, by the way, as I was leaving, they intentionally like did everything they could to get me on the schedule sooner. I was scheduled for September 8th. And by the time I was home for a half hour, they called me and they said, we can get you in next Thursday at 8 a.m.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, done. Like, y'all are amazing, you know? And so it's the little things that make us feel like we matter. I think for everyone who's listening, to ask yourself, how can I make someone else feel like they matter today? Or how can I show, you can't make someone else, how can I show someone else today that they matter by doing something small to see them or to listen to them or to validate them or to encourage them or to affirm them or to support them? What is one little thing I can do? And these were accumulations. And then not only that, like, but wait, there's more. One of the head dentists of the practice connected with me on Instagram because I posted about them. It's called Valley Dental Health, by the way. And I said, you know, we need more businesses in the world like this business. That's what I said specifically. And he said, I say we need more people in the world like you. You came with past experiences that should have made you closed off. You were open-minded and curious, and you were looking for good. And that kind of demeanor really allows us to step into our roles as a dental team. Like, so, and then he watched a video of me singing, and then he commented like, wow, what a voice. Like, just it's just intentional beyond intentional. These are things, we don't have to do these things, but it's these little things that sometimes take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes that make a profound difference.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton. You know, dreams are powerful pieces of intentional encouragement. We all have them. If you're a business owner, you've probably always dreamed of taking your sales to levels you've never seen before. I've got a guy that can help you with that. His name is Brad Norwood. My good buddy Brad has been on the Intentional Encourager podcast as a guest before, and he is a dream specialist. His company, Dream It Pro, offers incentive packages to travel to places such as the Masters, Kentucky Derby, the Super Bowl, even exotic places that you've always wanted to take your team, but you just didn't know how to do it. Brad's your guy. And oh, by the way, Brad's a certified bucket list coach, so he can help your team members achieve their personal dreams as well. I want you to go to www.dreamitpro.com and find out more, or call him directly at 479-466-6907. And by the way, tell him you heard it on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Let's get back to more great conversation here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Well, here's what you just said that I wrote down that is really the profound part, and everything you said was fantastic. Here's what I took away. Looking for good. You came in, you were like, listen, impress me, because to your point, Rachel, to your point, and we all come to experiences with expectations.
Yes.
We have a set of expectations, you know, and you were like, okay, listen, you mentioned your pediatric dentist and the relationship and how wonderful that was. You wanted that same experience to happen in this one. I think employees, as they change companies or as they stay at a company for a while, it's like, I give me a reason, give me something good that I can be proud of, that I can hang my hat on. And I love what you said there. And I don't think we in many cases, look for good or go into the expectation with good in mind. You know, like Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. Well, if the end is good, then we should have that expectation. I love that. So one thing that I noticed in your LinkedIn profile that I love is unmuted. Mm-hmm. How do leaders unmute themselves and start speaking good into their companies so that their employees can look for good in their leadership? Is that a loaded question?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's when you as a leader see something, it's hard for leaders because they don't want to demonstrate favoritism, but they don't want to feel like, well, I recognize that person, so it's sort of like if I don't love my children equally, one of them is going to get mad. Yeah, they will.
Just have one like I did, and you don't have to worry about it. Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, because I think a lot of the times employees can feel this kind of paternalistic relationship with the people that run the company. I mean, I worked for an organization for, in some capacity, 16 years that, you know, a lot of people saw the CEO as a company as sort of like a father figure. You know, they didn't want to disappoint dad. And I think in a lot of companies that similar feeling might be there. And so people have this sense that they don't want to let them down. But I think for leaders, and it meant so much to me if he would send me an email, or if he would send me a handwritten note, or if he would leave me a voicemail saying, hey, were your ears burning yesterday because I was telling so-and-so about such and such that you did. Those little things, a voicemail like that can literally take 15 seconds. You know, we tell it, we blow it up in our mind. It's this huge thing. It's going to take forever. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's like everyone listening right now could make a decision to like pause this podcast and think about who is someone in your life that you could encourage right now, who's someone that you know that's going through a hard thing. Can you send them a text message and say, hey, just want you to know that I'm in your corner. I'm thinking of you. If you want to catch up sometime this week, let me know. Like, you have no idea the hope that message could give somebody.
Yeah,
No
and
idea.
it's specific to them. And that's what I say quite a bit, Rachel. And I love that because you and I are thinking a lot in that same vein, because a lot of times people, we're generic in times we need to be specific.
Yes.
And we don't understand that, you know, and we talked off the top. You were talking about how I got your name right.
Yeah.
That's important, right? Because what if I said, oh, my guest is Raquel Druckenmiller or something, you know, you would think, oh my gosh, what a no talent hack, which in some cases you might be right. But what I'm saying is, you know, how many times, you know, people misspell Brian, they spell brain, which again, partially true, but you know, but again, when you know someone is thinking about you and they tailor that encouragement to you specifically, it's powerful, it's mind blowing.
Yes.
And I love what you said about the parental relationship between leaders and employees. So I want to focus on the leaders for just a moment here.
Yeah.
How do leaders turn that relationship from paternalistic to peer? Because really we should be walking side by side instead of, you know, looking up to mom and dad, so to speak, in the company for leadership. How do we make that leadership more congruent side by side?
Well, I mean, I think the hard part is that people are bringing, just candidly, I'm not a psychologist or a therapist. I've spent a lot of time with one, but that people are bringing their own relational dynamics into the workplace, right? So if someone perhaps didn't get certain needs met by a parental figure growing up, then they may look for it in a boss, and they may put undue pressure on a boss to be more than a boss should be. And they may be looking for a boss to be a dad or a boss to be a mom. You know, candidly, this absolutely happens in the workplace all the time. People are looking for a coworker or a manager or a boss to fill a role that somebody else in their life should have filled and did not. So that, I think, needs to be said. I think another thing is, you know, they're equal in the sense of both being humans. They're not equal in necessarily their authority or their ability to make decisions or their ability to influence or something like that. So I think that for leaders, one of the things leaders can do is to take those little steps to reach out and check in, there's something that you can do. I learned about from, who was it? Maybe Sean Aker, I think, about doing a 2-minute gratitude jumpstart, where at the start of the day, you just say, okay, I'm going to take 2 minutes, set a timer for 2 minutes. I'm going to send either text messages or emails to a couple of different people. And I'm just going to let them know I appreciate them, again, in a way that's as specific as I can be. I think another thing that leaders can do is to just be honest about their own stuff. To an extent, there's a selective vulnerability that we can show up with. And when leaders show up, and instead of coming off as like above people, holier than thou, if they come out and share, you know what, this has been a really hard time for me too. Like, gosh, homeschooling a kid, seeing my wife homeschool a kid has just, you know, I've just seen how hard it is. And I can't imagine, like, is there anything we can be doing to support you right now? Like to sort of normalize certain shared human experiences, I think is a way that leaders can be more relatable. And taking that time to be intentional and to call out the good. It's like, what good can I call out in someone today, whether it's in a meeting or on a phone call or, again, in an email or in a text message or in a chat, on a private chat, on a Zoom call, like, hey, thanks for what you just shared. That was a really great idea. And I'm glad that you brought it up. right? These are not hard things. They're not like, I cannot overemphasize how not hard this is. It just requires thoughtfulness, which most people don't necessarily approach their days with thoughtfulness.
Well, here's the thing that I'll say, Rachel, and I'll say this as we wind this part of our conversation down, is that we have an abundance of reaction and an absence of thought.
Yes.
When we see something that affects us, immediately the button is to react.
Yeah.
And I think if we would just be intentional with thought, and just to your brilliant point about just taking 15 seconds and just going, you know what? Today I was thinking about you, and here's what I value most about our relationship.
Yeah.
It's incredible. As you look at how leadership is going to move forward, and this is the last part of our discussion, and you have just lit it up with the things you brought to this discussion. Give leaders some intentional encouragement, how they can put themselves in a position to be those change agents of culture in their companies and create that culture of intentional encouragement.
I'd say this. I think one of the most important things that leaders can do is to be willing to go on their own journey of transformational self-awareness. And I think so few leaders are willing to turn the mirror on themselves or have the mirror turned on them to get genuine feedback about ways that they could potentially grow. Because there's a defensiveness and there's ego that comes up and there's pride and there's this sense that I cannot ever be without answers, or I must always be competent and I must always be impressive and I must, there's this pressure to perform that so many leaders feel. And I think the reactive behaviors that we see and the dysfunction that we see is often a result of the fact that people haven't done their own work. So hire a business coach, see a therapist, talk to a spiritual leader, have an honest conversation about people in your life and ask them, what shows up when I do? Like, what qualities do I bring into a room? That's advice that I got. And I'm happy, to connect folks to that. If anybody wants to message me on LinkedIn, I have other, things I can send them, different kinds of questions too. But that's a question that a coach, Lori Raggio, asked me 4 years ago. And it fundamentally changed when I got feedback about those questions. It fundamentally changed the way that I saw myself for the better. And I've also been seeing a therapist as a result of an accident. It's a PTSD, but it's been really transformational for me to work with her, work with a business coach, have mentors, as you mentioned earlier, the importance of mentorship. So I really think for leaders, be willing to turn the mirror on yourself and be honest with yourself, because if you can be honest with yourself, if you can do the work to grow and to reveal your shadow sides and be willing to do the hard work, the effective leadership will come more naturally. It'll be less effortful because you will have done the work yourself, and you'll be coming from a place of understanding and relatability of just how hard it is to show up in a way that's responsive and not reactive.
I love what you said there. What shows up when I do?
Yeah.
And again, with so many things that can distract us all, it's just showing up and being present in that moment. I love that. What a perfect way to end this part of our conversation. Rachel, remind folks how they can connect with you. Let them know the different platforms they can connect with you on, and we will get into your story in part 2 of our conversation.
Sure. So LinkedIn, first and foremost, that's where I hang out the most. So on LinkedIn, feel free to message me. I know, Brian, we both love when somebody sends us a message, right? And say, I heard about you on the Intentional Encourager podcast, and this is what I loved about it. It's not weird. People think it's weird. It's creepy. It's not. We love it. So do it. Instagram, you can find me at Unmuted Life. And then my website is unmutedlife.com. And then you can also find different videos of me that I'm looking to build up more on YouTube. And you can just search Rachel Druckenmiller on YouTube. Yeah.
Well, this podcast is going to go on YouTube. So again, so there you go. So Rachel Druckenmiller, can't wait for part 2 of our conversation. And again, I so appreciate you joining me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
Thank you.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And of course, the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through his word. If you're not subscribed to the Intentional Encourager podcast, hit the subscribe button wherever you get podcasts so you don't miss an exciting episode where you can get encouraged and stay encouraged. And remember, anyone, anywhere, at any time, any place can be an intentional encourager.